In the cold silence between the stars, a human knelt and whispered words no machine could ever understand. Oxygen was fading, hull integrity failing. Every logical projection said they should have been dead hours ago. And yet, she prayed. An alien watched her. No gods, no faith, no hope, just the ticking countdown to the end. But then, the impossible happened. Against every probability, help arrived. And as the alien floated in stunned silence, one sentence kept echoing in his mind. Not luck. Someone wanted us to live. What happens when faith outlives logic? The ship drifted through the starless dark like a dying ember, wrapped in silence so absolute it felt alive. Every corridor hummed faintly, not with power but with the slow unraveling of a vessel that had already accepted its fate. Inside this tomb of alloy and failing systems, one human knelt on the grated floor, hands clasped loosely, lips moving in whispers that vanished into the vacuum-sealed air like smoke and wind. Her name was Captain Alara Vance, the last living officer aboard the Solace. Her breath came thin, ragged, barely misting the air before the environmental controls failed to filter it. The oxygen levels had dipped below survival threshold hours ago. The emergency reserves were gone. The universe, it seemed, had already written her eulogy. Across the control bay, standing perfectly still, watched Jakan of the Tar, an alien whose species considered belief in gods not just outdated but dangerous. He had no prayer in his chest, no unseen presence in his mind. Just cold numbers and the mechanical certainty of death. He couldn't understand why the human kept whispering. The sensors screamed their verdict. No one was coming. No one should have even heard them. And yet, she prayed. The bay's lighting flickered again, a dying heartbeat in metal. Outside the viewport stretched an ocean of stars so distant they offered no warmth. The ship was tumbling slowly, rotating like a corpse caught in an endless current. Jakan's three pupilled eyes adjusted to the dim light, recording details with the clinical detachment of his kind. But something disturbed that detachment. The human's calm. Alara wasn't weeping. She wasn't fighting the inevitable. Her shoulders were steady, her voice a fragile thread unbroken. She spoke softly in a language Jakan did not know, though his translator tried and failed to give meaning to it. It was not a command, not a plea for rescue, not a calculation. It was faith. Someone's listening, she whispered to herself. Jakan's mandibles clicked in irritation. He had studied humans extensively since the war. Their resilience was biological. Their will to survive was evolutionary. But this belief in invisible saviors had no place in rational existence. Still, despite himself, he kept watching. A faint vibration tremored through the ship's bones. Not a rescue beacon, not a transmission, just the hull groaning against the cold. Jakan recalculated their odds below 0.04%. He would die here, not in battle, not under the weight of glorious logic, but in silence beside a fragile creature who prayed to nothing. He turned away, unwilling to be infected by her hope. Alara rose slowly, her knees stiff from the cold. Her vision blurred at the edges, hypoxia tightening its grip. But in her mind there was clarity. She walked to the shattered console and touched the hull plating as though laying a hand on the shoulder of an old friend. She remembered Earth, the scent of rain after a storm, the warmth of her mother's hands, the laughter of people who believed the stars were not empty. She closed her eyes and whispered again, "If you're out there, not for me, for him." The words were quiet, but the silence made them sound like thunder in Jakan's head. For him, not for herself. He had seen humans die before, soldiers screaming, colonists begging, but never like this. Never with serenity. He forced himself to ignore it, pacing toward the airlock, calculating escape options that didn't exist. But a seed, imperceptible, lodged itself somewhere beneath the layers of logic he wore like armor. Outside the ship, the void held its breath. No transmissions, no beacons, no fleet, and then something shifted. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't light. It was a subtle pressure on the edges of existence, like the universe exhaled for the first time in eons. A ripple of probability, infinitesimal and untraceable, brushed the drifting hull of the Solace. A derelict listening drone, a forgotten relic from an old mining war, caught a fragment of their dying signal. It should have ignored it. It should have passed on. But for a reason no algorithm could define, its decaying AI reoriented its antenna. The ping echoed into the dark. Somewhere, far away, a beacon responded. Alara didn't hear the beacon. She only felt something, an impossible weight lift from her chest. Her fingers tightened on the hull plating. A single tear slipped down, freezing instantly in the cold air. Jakan's sensors flicked on. A faint blip appeared on the interface, too small to be real. His rational mind rejected it outright. A phantom reading, he muttered in his native tongue. But the blip grew. And grew. Minutes bled like hours. The oxygen reserves were almost gone. Alara swayed, falling to her knees, her breath reduced to shallow gasps. Jakan steadied her against his better judgment, lowering her gently. "You're God," he said quietly, not as mockery but as a question. She didn't answer. She only smiled weakly, as if hearing something far beyond his comprehension. The blip on the sensor solidified into a shape, a real ship. A rescue vessel on a trajectory no rational equation could explain. Outside, thrusters flared against the black. The solace was not supposed to be found. But it was. And as Jakan stared at the approaching light, his mind, engineered for certainty, trembled. Alara exhaled a final fragile prayer into the cold. "Not luck," she whispered. "Someone wanted us to live." In that moment, long before the rescue pods docked and air returned, something inside Jakan cracked, not like metal under stress, but like frost under sunlight. For the first time, he felt something he could not name. Not belief, not conversion, just a weightless, impossible question. Was there something in the void? Listening. He didn't know, but as the light drew closer, the silence around him no longer felt empty. The void between the stars had no mercy. It swallowed hope the way black holes devoured light, without pause, without apology. And yet, against the architecture of probability itself, a single streak of silver light crossed that infinite dark. Jakan stared at the incoming vessel through the cracked viewport, his 3 pupils narrowing to slits. The rescue ship was real. Not a phantom. Not a glitch. Real. He recalculated their odds of detection again, 0.04%. He checked the readings. Then again. Then a 4th time, fingers trembling against the console. No algorithm could explain this. They weren't near any trade route, no distress network, no scheduled patrol. Their beacon was broken. Their life signs faint. The solace was a corpse adrift in nothing, and yet someone had heard. Behind him, Alara lay on the grated deck, her breath shallow, the blue of oxygen starvation creeping into her lips. Her fingers twitched faintly as if still holding on to a prayer no one else could hear. Jakan had never believed in gods. In his world, belief was considered an evolutionary defect, a clinging to comforting illusions when reason wasn't enough. But now his mind, a fortress built on centuries of logic, was under siege by a single question. Why now? The rescue vessel's engines flared brighter, its trajectory locking perfectly onto their drifting wreck. It moved with the precision of a guided blade through silk. No hesitation, no randomness. Jakan's heart, 2 chambers pulsing in sync, quickened, a rare betrayal of the calm he prided himself on. The airlock clamped. Metal met metal with a resonant thud that reverberated through the dying ship like a heartbeat returning after flatline. The emergency seals hissed. For the first time in hours, Jakan felt the faint vibration of another ship's life coursing through their hull. Alara's eyelids fluttered. The soft sound reached her even through the fog in her brain. She had been drifting toward the dark, toward a silence so vast it didn't feel like death but absence. Yet in the farthest corner of her fading consciousness, she heard something that didn't belong to the void. Engines. Real engines. Her lips parted in a whisper. "He heard me." Jakan knelt beside her, gripping her shoulder firmly. He didn't speak her language well, but he recognized the look in her eyes, a mixture of exhaustion, faith, and something else. "Victory. Rescue," he forced out, voice heavy with disbelief. "Coming." She exhaled slowly, like a diver breaking the surface after being underwater too long. The rescue team boarded, 5 figures in white armor suits bearing the insignia of the Haven Protocol. Their helmets carried the gold crest of the Outer Rescue Corps, a volunteer fleet known for answering signals long after governments had given up. The leader knelt over Alara without hesitation, sliding an oxygen mask over her face. "Captain Vance, can you hear me?" Her body jerked with the first deep breath. Air filled her lungs like light flooding a locked room. Tears pooled at the corners of her eyes, not from pain, but from something wordless. Jakan stepped back as the team moved efficiently, patching hull breaches, stabilizing oxygen flow, injecting emergency stimulants. He was an observer, alien and unneeded, but for once he didn't retreat into the comfort of logic. He watched with something dangerously close to awe. Their ship had been lost. Every rational model agreed they were dead. But these humans, these other humans, had come anyway, not because the odds favored them, not because it was logical, but because someone somewhere refused to believe in the silence. As Alara stabilized, the team's medic, a young woman with silver streaks in her hair, looked up at Jakan. "She's lucky." Jakan's throat vibrated with a low sound. "No, not luck." The medic frowned, assuming a language gap. But Alara heard it. Her weak smile spread beneath the mask. The Haven's Reach, the rescue vessel, was small but brimming with life. Warm lighting, the low hum of functioning systems, the smell of air scrubbers that actually worked. As they carried Alara to the med bay, Jakan followed silently, scanning every corner, still trying to unravel how this happened. The Haven's Reach captain, a tall man with a streak of ash-gray hair, approached. "We weren't supposed to be here," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Our route was rerouted 2 hours ago after a drone sent a phantom ping." Jakan's pupils dilated. "A drone?" "Yeah, old mining relic. It shouldn't have been functional. But it lit up just once, like someone flipped a switch in the dark." The captain's tone was pragmatic, but there was something beneath it, a hint of wonder he didn't want to admit. In the med bay, Alara stared at the ceiling as the warmth seeped back into her limbs. For a moment, she just listened to the sound of oxygen flowing through the mask. It was the sound of mercy. Jakan stood at the corner, his posture stiff, eyes never leaving her. "Why?" he finally said in his halting but clear English. "You prayed?" Her gaze softened. "Because I wasn't talking to the void." He frowned. "No one listens." She shook her head weakly. "Someone always does." Her words landed like a strike on a fault line that had long lain hidden beneath his carefully laid rational world. Later, when the med team left and the corridor lights dimmed, Jakan remained seated in the observation bay. The stars drifted past like silent witnesses. His people didn't believe in meaning. Stars were just gas. Life was coincidence. Existence was indifferent. But if that were true, why had a dead drone awakened? Why did a ship off course find them with surgical precision? Why did a human woman who should have been afraid smile into the dark? The questions were whispers, but they echoed louder than any logical certainty he had ever known. On the Haven's Reach, the rescue crew celebrated quietly. They had saved lives today. For them, it was just duty. But for Jakan, the alien who had spent his existence dismissing the idea of unseen hands, this night felt different. A fracture had appeared, small, but widening. Above the console, one star flickered brighter than the rest. As if winking through the dark, Jakan's claws tightened against the armrest. He whispered almost involuntarily, "What are you?" But no voice answered him, only silence, a silence that no longer felt empty. The Haven's Reach moved through the black sea of space with the steady grace of a vessel built for saving the lost. It cut through the void like a silver blade, engines whispering, a quiet hum that felt almost holy after the suffocating silence of the drifting Solace. But the silence that followed rescue was different now. It wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. Jakan sat alone in the forward observation bay, a broad dome of glass that opened into an infinity of stars. His species had long abandoned the idea of higher powers. To them, stars were fuel. Galaxies were numbers. Probability was God, and yet he couldn't stop thinking about the drone. The mining relic that shouldn't have woken, the phantom ping that had rewritten a ship's course. The way Alara's voice had cut through the dark as if summoning it. He traced the stars with his claws, following the streaks of light, trying to carve logic into something that refused to be contained. Behind him, soft footsteps echoed. Alara's. She was pale but standing now, wrapped in the navy blue medic's coat, oxygen mask gone but its faint imprint still marking her skin. Her steps were slow, not just from weakness but from reverence. She understood the silence differently than Jakan did. For her, it wasn't absence. It was a presence too big to name. You shouldn't be up, he said without turning, voice a rasp. I've been lying down for long enough, she replied softly. Besides, I wanted to see the stars. Jacan's mandibles flexed. They are just stars. She stepped up beside him, her reflection merging with the constellations. No, she said quietly. They're stories. For a long time neither spoke. Only the quiet hum of the engines filled the space between them. Jorkan's eyes drifted to her hands, clasped loosely, not in fear, not in desperation, but like someone ready to listen. Finally, he asked, Why do you believe? Her lips curved into a tired smile. Because believing doesn't need proof. It needs trust. Jacan exhaled slowly through his secondary gills. And if the rescue never came, I would have died. Still believing. He turned to face her then, trying to find mockery, denial, or doubt in her eyes. But there was none. Just quiet certainty. Not arrogance. Not logic. Something deeper. He hated how much that unsettled him. The ship's lights dimmed suddenly and a low pulse vibrated through the hull. An alert. Jacan straightened, instincts sharpening. Then came the chime. Soft, rhythmic, mechanical. Incoming signal. Captain Rowe's voice echoed over the comm. Bridge to all personnel. We've picked up something on long-range scanners. Not a ship, disturbance. That word in space meant many things. None of them good. Ilara and Jacan exchanged a glance. In that moment, their personal beliefs didn't matter. Only survival did. On the bridge, the holographic star map flickered with a ripple, a void anomaly. The kind that swallowed signals like they were nothing. The kind that should not exist in this region of mapped space. The captain leaned forward, jaw tight. Report. Sir, a navigator said. The anomaly wasn't there when we plotted our course. It just appeared. It's radiating gravitational waves, but there's no central mass. No star, no black hole. Nothing. Jacan stepped forward, scanning the display with growing unease. Gravitational wells without mass are impossible. Tell that to the scanner, the navigator muttered. The haven's reach moved closer, pulled gently toward the disturbance like a leaf caught in an unseen tide. The stars around them warped, not physically but perceptually. Light bent, shadows elongated in ways that made the human crew shiver without knowing why. Ilara felt it first, a pressure behind her ribs. The same feeling she'd had before the drone's signal. Not fear, something. Watching. The captain barked orders. Stabilize the course. Prep for evasive maneuvers. I don't like this. But the ship didn't respond the way it should have. Thrusters strained against an invisible drag. Jacan's chest tightened. He had fought in wars, escaped burning hulls, seen planets crack under bombardment. He had never felt this kind of wrongness before. It's not a gravity well, he murmured. It's something else. As the anomaly grew in the viewport, it revealed itself, not as a hole, but a shimmer. Like the surface of a pond when the wind brushes across it. Light bent around it in impossible ways, creating halos and streaks that stretched into infinity. Ilara whispered, It looks like it's breathing. And it did. With every pulse, their instruments flickered. One moment, clean readouts. The next, static storms. Then nothing at all. The captain slammed his fist on the console. I want distance, now! But the ship refused to turn. Jacan's eyes darted across the controls, translating the alien mathematics of the phenomenon. It wasn't pulling them in. It was guiding them closer. Not like prey. Like something had chosen them, the exact same way the drone had chosen to awaken. He froze. Probability didn't work like this. The odds of both events aligning? No, it wasn't odds. It wasn't math anymore. The shimmer expanded. Inside the distortion, shadows moved. Not like physical objects, but like ideas brushing against the fabric of reality. And then the whisper came, not through comms, not through air. Straight into their bones. Return what is owed. The bridge fell silent. The humans stared at one another in horror. Jacan stiffened. His kind didn't believe in gods. But this was no god. This was something older. Something outside equations. Ilara felt the pulse inside her chest deepen. It didn't feel like threat. It felt like recognition. Jacan clenched the railing, his rational mind fracturing at the edges. No entity can speak through vacuum, he whispered. Then what's doing it? The captain barked. No one answered. Ilara stepped forward slowly as if hearing something none of them could. The shimmer pulsed brighter in response. In that frozen moment, the Haven's Reach wasn't a ship anymore. It was a single grain of sand balanced at the edge of an unseen tide, and that tide was moving. Jakan's heart pounded. He should have been terrified. But beneath the fear, buried deep, was something else. An echo of Ilara's calm when they were dying. The same strange presence he had dismissed as a delusion. But what if it wasn't? The captain's voice cracked through the rising panic. "All hands, brace for contact." Jakan turned sharply toward Ilara. Her eyes were locked on the light. Her hands were clasped again, not in desperation but in quiet certainty, and as the shimmer swallowed the stars whole, Jakan heard his own heartbeat, and something else beneath it, something whispering back. The shimmer filled the viewport now, no longer distant or mysterious but immediate and alive. It rippled like liquid glass, bending the stars into ribbons of gold and black. The Haven's Reach hung before it like a leaf in a rising tide, its engines screaming in silence, every thruster firing. And yet the ship drifted forward, drawn toward the impossible. Jakan's breath came fast, each exhale a tremor. His claws dug into the cold railing of the bridge, the metal groaning beneath his grip. He was not a creature prone to panic. His species was bred on cold logic and survival calculations. But the thing outside wasn't logic. It was intention, and he could feel it looking back. Full reverse, Captain Rowe barked. "All engines." "They're at maximum," shouted the navigator. "We're not moving. No, we are moving." "It's pulling us." The distortion expanded, swallowing the surrounding starfield. One by one, the constellations winked out as though night itself was folding inward. The shimmer began to hum, a frequency so low it wasn't sound but pressure pressing against their ribs, their teeth, their bones. And then came the voice. Not through speakers. Not through comms. Through existence itself. You were heard. The bridge fell deathly silent. No alarms, no beeps. Only those 3 words hanging in the air like frost. Ilara froze where she stood, every hair on her arms rising. The voice wasn't human. It wasn't alien. It was older, like the vibration of deep space itself given shape. She didn't hear it with her ears. She felt it. Deep inside the part of her that had once whispered prayers in the dark. Jakan staggered back, his triple-pupilled eyes dilating. No physical source, he muttered, scanning displays that flickered between gibberish and static. No signal. No wave pattern. "It's not a signal," Ilara whispered. "It's speaking through us." He snapped his head toward her. "How can you know that?" "Because I felt it before." She didn't have to explain. He remembered the moment on the Solace, the whisper in the silence, the drone that shouldn't have answered, the impossible rescue. The same pressure now filled the bridge. That same presence, the shimmer pulsed again. This time the hum split the light around it into crystalline shapes, geometries that had no place in human or tar mathematics. Every line bent impossibly, forming something like a doorway without a door. Through it they glimpsed not a place but a feeling. Endless depth, endless eyes, endless intent. The captain swallowed hard. "Is this intelligent?" Ilara answered before anyone else. Yes, Jakan wanted to argue. His kind had mapped hundreds of phenomena. Pulsars, wormholes, dark energy rifts. All of it had explanations, eventually. But this wasn't phenomenon. This was presence, and the presence had spoken directly. "You called?" I answered. Ilara's knees weakened. She gripped the console for balance. "It heard me." Jakan stared at her as if the ground beneath him had crumbled. His mind raced through every probability tree, every theory of cosmic anomalies. None accounted for prayer. Without warning, the ship's gravity field fluctuated. Tools lifted off surfaces. Hair rose, breath caught in throats. For a split second, everyone aboard the Haven's Reach was suspended in a weightless silence. Then, one was chosen to speak. The lights snapped to black. Total darkness engulfed the bridge. Every display went dead. Even the emergency lights refused to flicker. It was a perfect dark, and then a single thread of light, thin, gold shimmering, descended like silk through the air. It stretched, winding, until it stopped at Ilara's chest. Her breath hitched. Jakan lunged forward, his voice sharp with alarm. "What is it doing to her?" But the captain held him back. The air itself seemed to hum with warning. Ilara's body began to glow faintly, not from heat but from recognition. Her pulse synchronized with the vibration. Her heartbeat aligned to something vast. When the void listens, it listens to one. And through one, the many are answered. Ilara's vision blurred with light. She wasn't standing on the bridge anymore. She was standing inside the shimmer, inside a place where light had weight and shadows spoke without mouths. 1,000 golden filaments stretched into infinity, each one connected to someone somewhere, praying or screaming or simply hoping. She gasped. The universe wasn't silent. It had been listening all along. Back on the bridge, Jekan's readings were blank. His people didn't have words for what they were seeing. For the first time in his life, his intellect was useless, and that realization terrified him more than any weapon ever had. "Ilara," he called softly, as if not to disturb the thing. "Come back," she didn't answer. Her body hovered inches above the deck, eyes open but lost in a place beyond matter. The void does not grant life. It remembers who is brave enough to ask. Ilara's lips trembled. "Why us?" "Because you prayed, and because he doubted." Her gaze snapped toward the edge of that infinite golden expanse where a faint shadow trembled. She saw Jekan, not here but reflected in the weave of reality. Two lives tied together, faith and logic bound by a single impossible moment. The voice was neither kind nor cruel. It simply was. One heart opened the door. One mind will walk through it. Ilara blinked and suddenly she was back. The lights returned with a blinding flare. Alarms wailed. The bridge flooded with data streams as if the anomaly had never silenced them at all, but the shimmer remained outside, undulating gently like a breathing star. She collapsed to her knees. Jekan caught her before she hit the floor. Her skin was warm, her breathing rapid, but her eyes, those were changed. She had seen something no human should have. What did it say? Jekan demanded. She looked at him, still dazed. It said, "It answered me, and it wants something." Before anyone could process her words, the shimmer rippled violently. A gravitational surge slammed through the ship, tossing crew from their stations. Sparks burst from consoles. Warning lights bled red. The voice returned. "Return what is owed, or the silence will take back its mercy." Ilara clutched Jekan's arm, her voice breaking into a whisper. "This isn't over." He met her gaze. For the first time, there was no mockery in his eyes, only the thin, sharp edge of fear, and something else beginning to grow behind it. Belief. The storm outside the observation dome of the Sanctum Arc had grown into something unnatural. Stars bled through the void like fractured glass. Pulses of light rippled in waves, folding and unfolding the black sea of space as though reality itself were breathing in shallow, trembling gasps. Dr. Mara Quinn pressed her forehead to the cold, transparent alloy. The chill burned her skin, grounding her in a way words never could. Behind her, the hum of failing environmental systems throbbed like a heartbeat. "Weak, stubborn, refusing to stop," she whispered, almost inaudibly. "Not yet." The entire ship groaned in reply, not as an answer, but as a wounded creature too exhausted to scream. Tavar stood in the shadows behind her. He had never seen a human like this. Silent, spine curved, as if the vastness beyond the hull had reached inside and bent her. He did not believe in gods. His species, the Volari, had abandoned superstition millennia ago. But what unsettled him now wasn't the storm outside. It was the way Mara's stillness felt like defiance. He finally spoke. "The anomaly is accelerating. The arc cannot hold if the gravitic shear grows another 13%. She didn't move. "I know. You are not evacuating." "No," she replied softly. "I'm not." The alien's pulse flickered through the bioluminescent veins along his neck. "Your kind fascinates me. You are cornered, your ship is dying, and yet you stay." Mara finally turned to face him. Her eyes carried a calm that didn't belong to someone on the edge of death. "Someone has to witness the storm," she said. "Someone has to believe that we're not just random dots on a dying map." In the command corridor, alarms pulsed a dull crimson through fractured glass panels. The graviton well outside was tearing apart physics itself. Every calculation they ran pointed toward oblivion. But in a corner of the ship, the last still pressurized chamber, an ancient beacon remained steady. It was a relic older than the Ark itself, a forgotten capsule carrying the celestial canticles, a collection of prayers recorded by explorers centuries before Mara was even born. She had grown up listening to those old whispers, not because she believed every word, but because it reminded her that someone before her had chosen hope too. As the ark trembled, she walked toward the beacon. The first recording was cracked, distorted. A man's voice broken by time and static. "We're still here, and if the stars hear me, if anything hears me, let them know humanity doesn't kneel to the dark. We talk back." The voice had belonged to the captain of the lost vessel Aurora, last known to have vanished at the edge of the same storm now devouring them. Tavar followed her. "You believe these chants will alter the anomaly?" Mara smiled faintly. "No, but I believe what they did for the people who spoke them." She pressed her hand to the beacon's surface. It glowed weakly like an ember fighting the wind. The recordings, centuries old, were echoes of stubbornness. They didn't change physics. They changed hearts. "Faith isn't about bending the universe to your will," she murmured. "It's about refusing to be bent by it." Outside, reality twisted again. The storm flared, blooming like a dark flower in the night. Energy readings spiked, violent, chaotic. Then something new happened. The storm began to pulse in rhythm. A pattern, faint but undeniable, like a heartbeat answering a heartbeat. Tavar stiffened. "That's impossible. It's syncing to our pulse emitters. It's listening." Mara closed her eyes. Or maybe it's just been waiting for someone to speak. For the first time since this nightmare began, her hand stopped trembling. Elsewhere in the ship, Lieutenant Sloan and the remaining crew struggled to stabilize the failing reactors. "We can't contain it," someone shouted. "The core's collapsing faster than predicted." Sloan's response was hard but steady. "Then make it give us enough time." They weren't fighting to live anymore. They were fighting to hold the line long enough for a miracle, or something that felt like one. Tavar moved closer to the observation dome. The pulses from the anomaly had shifted again, growing more structured. Patterns formed. Language? Code? No. Too wild for math, too precise for chaos. He realized something he'd never admit back home on Volar Prime. The storm wasn't just a storm. It was trying to speak. "Mara," he whispered. "This isn't random." "I know," she said, voice steady. "Neither is prayer." A jolt threw both of them off their feet. Bulkhead screamed. The starboard hull fractured like brittle bone. The ark began to spiral toward the event horizon of the storm. Gravity warped. Lights shattered, and in that chaos Mara stood. Her boots slid on the trembling deck. But she raised her voice, louder than the alarms, louder than reason. She recited the first of the celestial canticles, not like a desperate woman begging, but like a soldier commanding the void to listen. "O silent dark, you have swallowed stars, but we are not yours to keep. We speak, and in our speaking we are infinite." The storm pulsed in perfect harmony. Tavar stared, stunned. In his world, cause and effect ruled all, but here, words had found an echo. "Mara, what are you doing?" "Not praying," she breathed. "Remembering who we are." The anomaly shuddered. For the briefest heartbeat, the violent pull softened. Systems flickered back online. Oxygen flow stabilized by 2%. It was nothing. It was everything. In engineering, Sloan saw the readings spike upward. Whatever the hell she's doing, do not stop her. The bridge of the ark became a cathedral of defiance. One by one, scattered crew joined in, not because they believed in the old words, but because they believed in Mara. Their voices layered together, a ragged choir against the storm. Even Tavar, against everything he had ever known, whispered the final line with them. The anomaly's pulse grew louder, and then, like an ancient eye opening for the first time in centuries, something answered. A wave of luminous energy surged from the storm, not destructive this time. Gentle, searching, like a hand pressed against glass. Mara felt warmth spread through the hull, a pressure, not of crushing gravity, but of something alive. A single thought, not language, not sound, slipped through their minds. "You spoke. We heard." In that moment, every human heartbeat on the ark aligned with the storm's rhythm. Instruments went wild. No science in the galaxy could explain it, but Mara didn't need equations. For the first time since they'd entered this graveyard of lost ships, she didn't feel alone. She looked at Tavar. His expression was unreadable, but his voice trembled. "What have you done, Mara Quinn?" She exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the cold glass. "Nothing," she said. "I just reminded the universe that we're still here." The storm shuddered one last time. The spiraling pull stabilized at 42%, not escape but no longer inevitable death. A corridor had opened, a path carved not by thrusters, but by something older, stranger, and listening. The battle was far from over, but for the first time the void had spoken back, and the weight of the stars no longer felt so heavy. The corridor beyond the bridge was a graveyard of shadows. Emergency lights flickered in long, mournful pulses, painting the metallic walls in blood red and ash white. Beneath their feet, the great hull of the Sanctum Ark vibrated with a rhythm no engine had ever produced. It wasn't the groan of dying metal anymore. It was a heartbeat. Dr. Mara Quinn walked at the front of the small team, her hand brushing the cold steel of the bulkhead with each step. She didn't know why she was doing it. Maybe to reassure herself that the ship was still real. That she hadn't simply whispered herself into some collective hallucination. Behind her, Lieutenant Sloan muttered, "I swear if this thing grows a mouth and says hello." I'm spacing myself, the tension cracked slightly. A few tired chuckles bled through the exhaustion. It wasn't humor, it was oxygen. Tavar said nothing. His luminous eyes tracked the pulse patterns on the walls like a scientist staring at a new language for the first time. In a way, that's exactly what it was. They reached the resonance chamber, an unused experimental room deep in the Ark's spine. Once designed for advanced graviton mapping, it now felt like the ship's beating heart. The pulses were strongest here. The chamber's transparent floor revealed the swirl of the storm outside. No longer a chaotic void, but a glowing vortex, breathing with them. Mara placed her hand against the glass. Her pulse matched it instantly. There was no resistance, no delay. It was listening. Tavar stepped forward. His claws lightly tapped on the console. "This isn't gravitational distortion anymore," he said, voice low, controlled. "It's communication." Sloan snorted. "Communication with a black hole? Yeah, sure. Should we send flowers or just wave?" But Tavar didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the shifting frequency patterns, fractals folding into shapes that shouldn't exist. The anomaly was constructing signals in response to their heartbeats. Not words, not sound, something deeper. A whisper slid through the room. No speaker, no origin. "You spoke," the crew froze. "We hear." The voice wasn't human. It wasn't alien either. It was everything between, a vibration that bypassed ears and embedded itself directly into the nervous system. Mara staggered as if struck not by fear but by the overwhelming weight of it. It was like being recognized by something that had watched stars die and be born again. Sloan whispered, "Tell me I'm not the only one hearing that." Mara answered without turning. "You're not." The storm's pulse changed. New waves coursed through the Ark, stabilizing power conduits and correcting pressure imbalances that had plagued them for hours. Lights flickered, then steadied. Air circulation hummed back to life. The ship was being healed. Tavar's voice trembled with something he'd never experienced. Reverence. "This is impossible. No known civilization can interface with matter at this scale without technology." "It's not technology," Mara said quietly. "It's intention." The whisper came again. "You remember the songs. You carried them through the dark. You are not alone." Mara's throat tightened. She realized what it was referring to, the old beacon, the celestial canticles. Centuries of human defiance whispered into the void. All this time, humanity had thought they were talking to empty stars. But the stars had been listening. "Who are you?" she asked, voice barely holding together. "No name. We were the wind, the shadow between suns. We watched. And you sang." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Whatever this entity was, it didn't speak in lines of logic. It spoke like a storm remembering a dream. Sloan stepped forward, gripping his sidearm. Not to aim, but to feel something solid. "If it's listening, it can help us get out of here." The storm's light rippled violently at his words. Not in anger, but in a tremor of warning. "Leaving is not without cost. The path is open." "But the gate remembers a price," Mara frowned. "What price?" No answer came. Only silence. The pulse slowed. Tavar approached the central interface, a curved ring of transparent alloy. "It's withdrawing. Whatever it is, we spooked it." "No," Mara said, shaking her head. "It's waiting." "For what?" She hesitated. Then it hit her like a quiet blade of clarity. For a choice. The entity wasn't just offering them escape. It was testing them. And in its silence, Mara felt something else. A shadow moving beneath the storm. Not malevolent, but old. Ancient enough to remember when humanity hadn't yet touched the stars. The Aurora, she thought suddenly. The lost ship from the beacon. What if they hadn't been lost at all? What if they'd been taken to make the same choice? She stepped onto the glass floor at the chamber's center. The storm flared. Every light in the room dimmed except the pulse beneath her feet. A whisper coiled up through the structure and wrapped around her heartbeat. One stays. The rest may leave. The words hit like shrapnel. Sloane exploded. No, hell no. We're not playing by the rules of some cosmic ghost. Tavar's gaze darkened. This explains the Aurora's disappearance. They never returned because one of them stayed. Mara's hands tightened into fists. She could feel the entire crew looking at her. Not because she had rank, but because she was the one who spoke first. The one who sang the words, "Why one?" She asked the storm. Because a voice must anchor the bridge. Without a voice, the path collapses. Without sacrifice, no crossing. For a moment, no one breathed. The storm had healed their ship, opened a path out. But it demanded one of them stay to keep that path open. Mara closed her eyes and saw her younger self, lying beneath the night sky of a quiet earth long gone, listening to the canticles for the first time. The stars had always felt like watchers. Now she understood why. She whispered, "It's not a punishment. It's a relay." Tavar's jaw tightened. And what happens to the one who stays? The storm pulsed softly. They do not die. They become. The words didn't comfort her. They scared her more than death. Sloane slammed his hand against the wall. We're not leaving anyone behind. We find another way. Mara turned to him, her voice steady in a way that frightened even her. There is no other way. Tavar took a step closer to her. His expression was unreadable, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Then it shouldn't be you, she almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it hurt too much not to. Of course it should be me. I started this, you spoke the songs, he said. But it does not mean you have to carry them alone. The storm pulsed again, low, deep, resonant. A choice must be made. One anchor. The bridge waits. The chamber lights began to dim slowly, like a heartbeat fading. Sloane's voice cracked. Mara, she raised a hand gently. Don't, not yet. Her gaze lingered on the swirling light beneath her boots. For the first time, she understood the Aurora's silence. They hadn't disappeared. They'd become part of the storm, and if she stayed, she would too. Tavar stepped forward, standing beside her. My people don't pray, he said softly. We build. We survive. But if this thing is asking for a bridge, then let it have a builder. She turned sharply. Tavar, no. You're a voice, he said. I'm a soldier. A sentinel. That's what I was born for. But before she could answer, the storm flared again, brighter than ever. For the first time, it spoke with emotion. Both cannot anchor. One must carry the silence. The other must remember. The temperature in the room dropped. The arc systems began syncing automatically to the storm's energy signature. The countdown to collapse was ticking again. The choice was no longer a concept. It was now Mara met Tavar's gaze. They didn't need to speak. Words would only cheapen the weight of it. One of them would have to become a part of something older than their species, to anchor the others back to the light. And whoever did would never come home. The storm whispered again, almost gently now. Decide. The bridge cannot wait. Become, or be unmade, Mara inhaled slowly. Her pulse synchronized with the storm's one last time. The path home was open, but it would not come free. The chamber trembled with a rhythm older than time. The storm outside the viewport had stopped raging. It no longer looked like a devouring maw, but like a colossal, luminous eye, wide open, watching, waiting. Mara stood at the heart of the resonance chamber, every light around her dimming to a soft crimson glow. The pulse beneath the transparent floor synced with her breathing. As if the ship itself were holding its breath, the whisper returned. Not as a threat this time, but as a quiet, patient reminder. One stays. The bridge remembers the anchor. Behind her, the others stood in a crescent of silent despair. Lieutenant Sloane's fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles bled. Tavar's luminous eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in a soldier's helplessness. Mara could feel the gravity of their unspoken thoughts pressing against her back. None of them wanted to say it. None of them wanted to look at her, because they already knew who would step forward. She took one step closer to the glowing center. In that instant, the storm brightened, responding to her heartbeat like a living, breathing creature. It wasn't a god. It wasn't even a voice in the way humans understood, but its presence was aware of her, aware of the song she had whispered when they thought they were dying. Sloan finally broke the silence. "Mara, don't you dare," his voice was low, cracked. Not the bark of a lieutenant, but the plea of a friend who'd already buried too many faces. She didn't turn. "Someone has to. There are 4 of us," he snapped. "Why does it have to be you?" Tavar answered before she could. "Because the storm has already chosen her. We're just trying to argue with inevitability." Sloan spun on him. "And you're fine with that?" The alien's throat worked before he answered. "No, but I understand it." Mara closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw it again. The drifting blackness of space, the rasp of failing life support, and the soft whisper of her prayer. The moment when everything should have ended, that was when the storm answered, and now it demanded a reply. She turned finally, meeting Sloane's furious, wet eyes. "You said once that I was too stubborn to die. Turns out I'm just stubborn enough to stay. Damn it, Mara." But she raised her hand and stepped forward again. The floor brightened beneath her boots, each step like walking deeper into the throat of a living star. Tavar moved closer, stopping just beside her. "If the storm needs a voice, then maybe it doesn't have to be only human." She stared at him. "Tavar, don't. My kind doesn't pray," he said softly. "We build. We stand guard. We stay." Her chest tightened. He wasn't saying it to be noble. He meant it. And that made it worse. The whisper slid through the room again, almost like it was listening to their argument with amusement. "One anchor. One bridge. One memory. 2 voices break the gate. It wasn't a bargain. It was law." She stepped back toward him until their shoulders brushed. "If you stay, the songs die with me. If I stay, you carry them." Tavar's jaw flexed. "You're assuming I won't learn to sing." "Not the way I did." Their breaths synced, a heartbeat caught between 2 species. 2 choices and a gate that did not care for either. Outside the viewport, the storm's glow swirled tighter like a lens focusing. A corridor of light was forming, an exit tunnel piercing through the heart of the anomaly. The path was ready, the cost was not. Sloan slammed his fist against the railing. "This is wrong. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Mara said softly. He shook his head wildly like a man refusing the last shovelful of dirt on a grave. "We're human. We find another way." And that was when the storm spoke again, clearer, deeper than before, cutting through the room like a blade through silk. "Human, the word of your kind. We have listened to your songs. You build paths where none exist. But the path was built long before your breath. Choice remains. It is all that ever belonged to you." Silence. Tavar exhaled slowly. "It understands us. Not like a machine, like a witness," Mara nodded faintly. "Then let it witness one last thing." She stepped forward again. This time she didn't look back. The floor beneath her feet flared with white light. Energy rippled through the entire ship, and the heartbeat of the storm synced fully with hers. Panels snapped online, systems hummed as though the Ark had been reborn. Anchor detected. Bridge aligning. Tavar was suddenly in front of her, blocking the center. His face was unreadable, but his voice carried the weight of a final decision. "No, I will not let you give everything. Tavar, my people have no afterlife. No prayers. If I stay, there is no God to meet me." His breath was steady, calm. "If you stay, someone might still hear your song." For a second, her composure fractured. The tears she'd held back finally burned their way out. "This isn't fair." "No," he said, "but neither is war, and yet we still fight." The storm brightened as if sensing his decision. Its whisper curved around him like wind around a stone in the river. "You choose to become?" He lifted his chin. "Yes." "Then you are the anchor." The light beneath him surged upward, encircling his form like threads of living energy. Sloan shouted something. Mara couldn't hear it. Her heartbeat roared in her ears like thunder. "No!" she cried, lunging forward. But Tavar caught her wrist, holding her with surprising strength. "You taught me what a prayer sounds like, Mara Quinn." His voice was soft. Final. "Now let me answer it." The floor cracked open in a cascade of white fire. Energy poured upward, wrapping Tavar in coils of stormlight. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. He simply stood, tall, proud, unflinching, as the entity's voice merged with his. Anchor chosen. Bridge stabilized. Memory carried in 2. The last words made Mara freeze. 2? She whispered. The storm answered in a whisper softer than breath. 1 becomes the gate. 1 remembers the prayer. A thread of light shot from Tavar's chest to hers, weaving through the space between them like a glowing strand of silk. It burned, not painfully but deeply. A bond was being forged in a language older than time. She would remember what he would become. The corridor of light outside the viewport solidified, a perfect tunnel cutting through the heart of the storm. Their way home. But at its center, Tavar was no longer entirely himself. His body dissolved into the luminous architecture of the chamber, veins of light spreading outward from where he'd stood, merging with the storm, with the ship, with everything. His last human words echoed through the chamber like a soft wind against the hull. Mara, don't waste it. Sloane grabbed her by the shoulders as the ship lurched. We have to go, now. She couldn't move. Her fingers were still outstretched toward the storm, toward where Tavar had stood. She didn't want to leave. She didn't want to turn away from the one who had chosen to stay. But the Ark's engines surged to life on their own, guided by something greater than them. Bridge open. Time short. The voice wasn't quite the storm anymore. It wasn't quite alien either. It was Tavar and the storm. Together. Mara staggered to the console, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Her voice was raw but steady. Engage the bridge. Sloane stared at her. He's gone. She met his eyes with something harder than grief. No, he became. She slammed the control. The ship jerked forward into the corridor of light. Outside, the storm didn't rage or resist. It opened like a colossal gate, light swirling around them like the petals of a cosmic flower. Inside the bridge, every system was syncing perfectly, as if Tavar himself was guiding their way. Mara sat in silence, her fingers gripping the armrest. Somewhere inside the resonance of the storm, a soft whisper echoed. Not a cosmic voice this time, but Tavar's. Like wind through a forgotten temple, 1 remembers the prayer. And Mara whispered back into the silence, I won't forget. As the Sanctum Arc plunged through the storm and back toward the stars, Mara felt the thread in her chest still glowing faintly. Not burning, just waiting. Somewhere beyond the edge of known space, Tavar was no longer flesh and bone. He was the bridge, the guardian of the gate, the silent sentinel between light and dark, and Mara would carry the song. The first thing Mara Quinn noticed when the Sanctum Arc burst from the storm was silence. Not the suffocating silence of vacuum, but the soft, weightless kind that comes after a hurricane ends. The kind that makes the soul realize it survived something it shouldn't have. The viewport bloomed with starlight, real stars, known constellations. They were home. Not home, Earth was centuries behind them, but chartable space. A navigable grid of beacons and patrol routes. It was like stumbling out of a blizzard into a familiar street. Around her, the crew's sobs, gasps, and laughter came in broken waves. No one shouted. No one screamed. They whispered. Whispers were enough. But for Mara, the silence was louder than the stars. She could still feel it. A faint pull beneath her sternum, a thread glowing like a pulse that wasn't hers. It connected her to something far away, or maybe inside the void itself. Tavar. He wasn't dead. She would have felt it. He was anchored. Sloane collapsed into the pilot's chair, running both hands through his sweat-drenched hair. His voice trembled as he muttered, "We're actually out." Mara didn't answer. She was still watching the storm recede through the aft viewport. But it wasn't a storm anymore. From here, it looked like a gate, a perfect halo of silver-blue light, suspended in the darkness. No swirling chaos. No gravitational distortion. Just a door. A door that now had a guardian. The navigation console blinked awake with the comforting blue of normal space systems. Sloane leaned over it, eyes wide. "Mara, we're only 36 light years off the periphery beacon. We're back," He laughed. A strange, cracked laugh. "We're actually back." Mara's voice was a whisper. "Yeah." But the word tasted like ash. As the others began sending out distress calls, she walked to the viewport. Her hand lifted, fingers brushing the cold glass as if she could still touch the gate. The thread in her chest pulsed once, then again. Not words, not sound, but presence. He was still there, not alive the way he had been, but not gone either. One remembers the prayer. She inhaled sharply. The whisper wasn't audible. It wasn't even thought. It was something more delicate, like a breath on the back of her neck from across light years. In the communications bay, Ensign Hart began receiving a flood of return signals. Patrol fleets, civilian networks, science stations, humanity's scattered voice lighting up like dawn. They'd been gone for months, officially declared lost. The Ark's reappearance would ripple through the galaxy like the flare of a reborn star. Sloan shouted across the bridge, "Quinn, they've got us on all channels. They're asking for status, casualty reports, mission logs. Hell, they're cheering out there." Mara forced herself to turn from the viewport. The crew needed her. The living needed her. She straightened her shoulders. "Patch me through." The central hollow channel flickered to life, projecting a soft blue sphere of light in the middle of the bridge. It was crowded with faces, military commanders, scientists, old friends, all talking at once. The flood of voices was overwhelming, but all she could hear was the absence of his. "Mara Quinn, this is Fleet Command. We thought you were lost. How did you make it through the singularity?" She opened her mouth, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she explain what happened? How could she explain who was still in there? Sloan stepped beside her, his voice rough. "We had help." A pause. "From whom?" He hesitated. "From something that wasn't supposed to be there." A different voice broke through the chatter, older, familiar. "Mara." Her breath caught. She recognized that tone instantly. Admiral Lee, the man who'd authorized this mission. Her mentor. He leaned forward in the hollow, brow furrowed. "You saw something in there." She didn't lie. "Yes." "Is it hostile?" She looked back at the gate, glowing softly in the distance. "No, not hostile." "Then what?" Her gaze dropped to the floor for a moment. Then she whispered, "It listened." The room, and even the channel, fell silent. Hours later, the Ark docked with a patrol carrier for medical triage and debriefing. Crew were offloaded. The news spread faster than light across the networks. The Ark had returned. The survivors were alive, but not all of them. Tavar's name appeared in every casualty log, but Mara couldn't bring herself to sign off on the final death declaration, because he wasn't dead. He was something else now. Medical officers tried to keep her in the infirmary. She refused. She wandered back onto the ship down to the resonance chamber, now dormant, silent, just another piece of steel and glass. But when she stepped inside, the thread in her chest pulsed again. It was faint, like a distant heartbeat echoing through time. And in that heartbeat, she heard him. The gate watches. The storm remembers. Her hands gripped the rail. Tavar. But the whisper faded, like ripples on water after the stone sinks. Over the following weeks, the world around her changed. Fleet Command issued orders to study the gate. A dozen science vessels converged on the coordinates. Data streams poured in, filled with phenomena beyond their comprehension. The storm wasn't consuming space. It was shaping it. The Ark's survival became legend. Engineers dissected every system, trying to understand how they'd escaped. They'd find no explanation in wires or equations. The real answer wasn't on the ship. It was in the gate. Mara sat through endless briefings, interviews, and mission reconstructions. Every time someone asked how they survived, she gave the same answer. "We didn't. We were carried. Some thought it was poetic. Others thought it was code for classified tech. A few scientists began whispering something else behind closed doors. Maybe the storm isn't a phenomenon. Maybe it's an intelligence. Mara didn't correct them, but she didn't tell them about Tavar either. That was hers to keep. One night, unable to sleep, she went to the outer observation deck of the patrol carrier. The gate shimmered in the far distance like a star that refused to fade. Her breath fogged the glass. "Are you still there?" The thread pulsed again. She froze. And then, faintly, like the ghost of a voice carried on cosmic wind, "I'm still watching the path. Tavar." It wasn't sound. It wasn't even a thought. It was faith made real. Mara sank slowly to the floor, the weight of everything finally breaking over her. She buried her face in her hands, shaking, not from fear, but from the unbearable truth. She was safe because someone chose not to be. The next morning, scientists approached her. They wanted her help in decoding strange signal patterns radiating from the gate. "We think it's trying to communicate," they said. She didn't tell them the obvious. It already was. She could feel his presence in those signals. Not constant, not always clear, but like a sentinel breathing just beyond the veil. Over the coming months, the gate at Periphery became the most studied anomaly in known space. Expedition fleets formed. Colonies began discussing what it meant for humanity's future. But Mara knew the truth wasn't in their telescopes or math. It was in the silence between their words. The gate wasn't just a doorway. It was a promise. And behind that promise, someone was watching. One evening, Sloane found her standing alone at the viewport again. "Every day you come here," he said quietly. "You talk to him, don't you?" Mara didn't deny it. "He listens." Sloane leaned on the railing beside her. "I still don't understand why he did it." She turned to him. Her voice was soft, steady. "Because someone had to." Sloane's jaw clenched. "And you were ready to?" "Yes." "Then why him?" She stared at the gate, glowing faintly in the black. "Because that's what humans do to each other," she said. "We inspire someone else to stand where we were willing to fall." The gate pulsed once, almost like it was agreeing. Mara smiled faintly, tears catching in the light. "One remembers the prayer," and she whispered back as she did every night. "I remember." The stars beyond the cracked viewport burned like cold eyes. Vast, indifferent, watching. For a long time, the only sound in the emergency deck was the low, pulsing hum of the ship's half-dead reactor. It wasn't enough to power the engines. It was barely enough to keep them alive. Commander Leora Vale floated weightless, her gloved fingers pressed gently against the glass. The fractures in the viewport mirrored the fractures inside her, hairline cracks but spreading. Her breath fogged the helmet in quiet rhythm, each exhale a reminder that she still lived, when she shouldn't. Behind her, Captain Kethra of the Threxan Dominion watched in silence. Once the alien had mocked human faith. Once it had seemed absurd to her that a species so fragile believed in anything other than physics and probability. Now, silence filled her where certainty used to live. Leora whispered again, just as she always did in the fragile hours between darkness and death. Not loud, not desperate, just a thread of sound carried through the failing ship like the heartbeat of a dying star. "Please, let us see tomorrow." Kethra felt that sentence like a blow. There were no gods in Threxan culture. No prayers. No one to ask for mercy when the vacuum came. But something about the way the human said it, steady as if speaking not to an invisible skyfather but to the very fabric of existence, unnerved her. It wasn't weakness. It was defiance wrapped in softness. The ship was drifting toward the graveyard ring, a halo of twisted dead vessels orbiting a silent star. No one returned from the graveyard. No signals escaped. It was a trap built by emptiness itself, swallowing thousands of lost ships over centuries. Their beacon was down. Their engines were dying. Their rations were measured in breaths. And still, Leora prayed. Kethra floated closer. The dim emergency lights washed everything in blood-red hues. The human's eyes caught the faint light like fragile stars of their own. They weren't afraid. Not truly. That unsettled the alien deeply. Do you believe this? Sound you make changes reality? Kethra's voice was rough, translated into the common tongue by the ship's fading linguistic core. It wasn't mockery anymore. It was hunger. A question dragged from a soul that didn't know what a soul was. Leora didn't look away from the stars. No, she breathed. I believe someone listens. Someone, Kethra repeated, the word like a strange shape on her tongue. Not luck? The human turned at last. Her face, pale in the failing light, held no fanaticism, just a quiet certainty. Luck doesn't love, she said simply. Luck doesn't choose. The alien wanted to scoff. But something deep inside, something buried under layers of logic and centuries of Threxan coldness, shifted uneasily. Hours bled together like ink in zero gravity. Kethra sat alone in the command alcove, staring at the blinking red console. The last power cell was dying. One flare left in their survival kit. One broadcast. One chance, but no one answered in this part of the void, no one ever did, and yet... Her gaze drifted to the human curled up near the viewport, whispering into nothing, as if that nothing might whisper back. Kethra clenched her jaw. She was Threxan, bred to believe in cause and effect in measurable forces. But what if this belief wasn't a weakness? What if it was the thing that made humans so infuriatingly hard to kill? She remembered the Battle of Altheon Ridge, how humans with broken limbs still charged the artillery lines, how their medics sang while pulling the dying from the mud, how they refused to let silence have the last word. The Threxans had called it insanity. But perhaps it was something else entirely. A distant echo rattled through the hull. Kethra snapped upright, talons digging into the metal. Her mandibles flexed. It wasn't the creak of structural failure. This was sharper, rhythmic, a ping, then another, a signal. Leora's eyes opened before Kethra could speak. She drifted toward the console, fingers trembling. Not with fear, but with hope. Vector, she whispered. Impossible, Kethra hissed, scanning the readings. There are no active fleets here. This region is empty. Then who's knocking? Kethra stared at the radar. The signal grew louder, like footsteps approaching from the dark. A single ship, small, fast, no transponder ID, a ghost in the graveyard. The alien's rational mind screamed it was a trap. Raiders, scavengers, pirates. But the human's lips curved into the smallest, quietest smile. They heard. Leora said softly. The rescue ship approached through the drifting bones of forgotten vessels, weaving like a predator that wasn't sure if its prey was dead or playing dead. Its light swept across the fractured hull of the ardent grace like cold hands. For a heartbeat, Kethra thought it would pass them by. Then, a docking clamp extended. Metal kissed metal. The sound was soft, but to Kethra it roared like thunder. The impossible was happening. Leora closed her eyes and whispered one word. Thank you. They floated through the airlock in silence. The figure waiting for them wore no insignia. Not military. Not Dominion. Not fleet. A human. Lean, pale, with frost-burned scars around his jaw and the steady eyes of someone who had seen too many endings. Thought I was too late, the man said. Kethra blinked. How did you find us? He tilted his head, almost amused. I didn't. I felt something tug. So I changed course. Kethra's mouth went dry. Felt. That wasn't a navigational term. That wasn't strategy. That was madness. But Leora just smiled. You answered. The man didn't ask how she knew he would later. When the ardent grace drifted behind them like a corpse and the warmth of the stranger's vessel wrapped around their frozen skin, Kethra sat in the quiet cabin alone. Outside, the graveyard ring faded into distance, no prayers, no whispers, just silence, and in that silence, something moved inside her, a tiny trembling question. What if reality wasn't as empty as she had always believed? She thought of the words that had haunted her since the beginning. Not luck. Someone wanted us to live. For the first time in her life, the alien didn't try to explain it away. She simply listened. To the silence between heartbeats, and for the first time, it didn't feel empty. The ardent grace was gone. What remained of the ship drifted silently into the dark, a broken relic swallowed by the graveyard ring. But its story hadn't ended with the wreckage. It lived on, carried in the lungs of two survivors who shouldn't have lived. Kethra sat alone in the dim quarters of their rescuer's vessel. The soft hum of stable life support filled the air. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. Silence pressed against her like a physical thing. Not the clean, mathematical silence she had grown up with, the predictable kind of nothing that science could explain. This silence had texture, depth, weight, like it was listening. Leora knelt near the viewport again, her hands clasped loosely. No desperation, no grand ceremony, just the quiet rhythm of a habit as old as her bones. Her whisper was almost inaudible beneath the hum of the ship, but Kethra heard every word. "Thank you for what I cannot explain." Kethra's claws tightened around the edge of the bunk. She didn't believe. She had never believed. Threxans were taught from the cradle that the universe was a machine, perfect in its indifference. If something happened, there was a reason. If it didn't, there wasn't. Simple, logical, clean, but then, why did her chest ache with something she didn't have a name for? The man who'd rescued them, Orin, moved like someone who didn't belong to any flag. His ship bore no insignia, no fleet markers. A scavenger, maybe, a rogue pilot, or someone who simply lived where empires forgot to look. Kethra watched him from the corner of the common deck as he adjusted navigation. "Why did you come here?" she finally asked. He didn't turn. "I told you," he said simply. "I felt a pull." "That is not an answer," Kethra growled. He looked over his shoulder then, eyes glinting with something dangerously close to amusement. "No, it's not. But it's the truth." Kethra's mandibles flexed. "You risked your life on a feeling?" Orin smiled faintly. "That's what we do." The alien bristled. "Who's we?" "The ones who believe there's more to this universe than empty math." The word slammed into her like a solar flare. She wanted to argue, to drown it in equations, probabilities, numbers that comforted her like a second skin. But the equations had failed in the graveyard ring. Probability had said they would die, and yet here she sat alive. Kethra retreated to the observation chamber hours later. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass, cold, perfect, terrifying. She pressed her forehead against the viewport. "Why?" she whispered into the darkness. "Why us? Why not the thousands of others who drifted here and died in silence?" The universe didn't answer, but the silence was different. Behind her, soft footsteps. Leora approached, wrapped in the faded emergency blanket Orin had given her. Her hair floated weightlessly in the low-grav corridor, haloed by starlight. "You're not sleeping," she said gently. Kethra didn't turn. "Do your gods answer you?" Leora's brows furrowed slightly, not at the question, at the weight behind it. "No," she replied softly. "Not in words. Then why do you speak into nothing?" Leora's eyes drifted to the stars. "Because it's not nothing." Kethra exhaled sharply. "That is not an answer." Leora stepped closer, her voice steady. "Neither is luck. You trust equations. I trust that we are more than equations." Kethra's claws twitched. Her species didn't talk like this. They didn't speak of faith in stars and feelings, but she found herself listening anyway. Later, when Orin slept in the cockpit, the two women drifted through the ship's silent corridors like ghosts caught between worlds. Kethra found herself remembering the war. The day her ship had bombarded a human colony. How the humans didn't surrender even when the sky fell. How they sang through the bombardment. Sang. As if their voices could push back against steel and fire. She had thought them mad then. Now she wasn't so sure. "You humans," Kethra murmured, not looking at Leora. "You fight in strange ways." Leora gave a soft laugh, not mocking, just tired. "We've had a lot of practice. You sing in war. You pray to silence. You keep fighting when you should break. And your people don't." Kethra's jaw tightened. "We follow the numbers. When they say there is no chance, we stop. Then maybe that's why we're still here." Kethra froze. The humans' words weren't loud, but they hit like a blade. Maybe that's why we're still here. Not because of technology, not because of strategy, because humans refused to stop. A warning light blinked on the console. Leora drifted over, scanning the display. A faint gravitational wave had rippled across their path, too regular to be natural. Something was out there. Kethra joined her, reading the alien characters of Oren's modified system, a small craft approaching on a vector parallel to theirs, unregistered, silent, predatory. Raiders, Kethra hissed. Her training flooded back, the cold, sharp clarity of survival. Leora's pulse quickened, but her voice stayed calm. We have weapons? Minimal, Kethra said. They have the advantage. The human's hand trembled. Not from fear, from the weight of what might come. She whispered something under her breath. The alien didn't understand the words, but she felt their shape. Minutes later, their ship drifted in the shadow of a broken moon fragment as the raider vessel approached. Its jagged hull was painted black, scavenged from graveyard wrecks. No insignia, no mercy. Oren strapped into the pilot's chair, face carved into calm steel. If we run, they'll catch us. If we fight, we probably die. Kethra bared her teeth. And if we do nothing? Leora's gaze didn't waver. Then we let someone else decide. Oren glanced at her, not confused but knowing. You're going to pray, aren't you? She gave a faint smile. You'd be surprised how often it works. The raiders locked weapons. The stars held their breath. In the silence before impact, Leora whispered again. Not loud, not desperate. Just steady. If we are meant to die, then let it be quick. But if we are meant to live, show us the path. Kethra's claws dug into the armrest. This was madness. A prayer wouldn't stop plasma rounds, but something in the void shifted. An energy surge, small but focused, pulsed from the direction of the graveyard ring. A dormant satellite, forgotten for centuries, flared to life for exactly 3 seconds. It wasn't enough to fight, but it was enough to interfere. The Raiders' targeting system flickered. Oren didn't hesitate. He slammed the thrusters sideways, threading through the debris field with impossible precision. Plasma bolts grazed their hull but missed clean. A gap opened where none should have. They escaped, not unscathed, but alive. Hours later, when the danger was behind them, Kethra sat in silence again. The satellite had gone dark, dead once more, no signal. No explanation. Her mind clawed for rational answers. Perhaps it was a random malfunction. Perhaps a residual energy discharge. A coincidence. But deep inside, she knew what she had seen. Leora floated nearby, eyes closed, whispering softly into the dark. Kethra didn't interrupt. She just listened, and this time, the silence between them didn't feel like nothing. It felt like someone was listening too. For the first time in her life, the Threxan soldier didn't have an equation to hide behind. For the first time, she didn't want one. The storm of the raider chase was behind them, swallowed by the graveyard ring. What remained was silence, the deep kind, the kind that hums beneath your skin like a heartbeat you didn't know you shared with the stars. Leora floated alone in the observation chamber, wrapped in the faint blue glow of the ship's panels. Her hands were clasped loosely, not out of ritual, but gratitude. She wasn't praying for a miracle this time. She was thanking the silence that had answered without speaking. Kethra watched from the corridor. The Threxan soldier, once all bone and logic, felt something dangerous blooming inside her chest. Not belief, not yet, but wonder, and wonder was something her kind had long forgotten. Outside the viewport, stars moved past in quiet procession. They weren't just lights now. They felt alive, not in the way creatures live, but in the way oceans listen. Oren entered the deck, wiping engine grease from his hands. Course is set. We'll reach the border lanes in 2 standard days. Leora nodded but didn't speak. Kethra, still by the door, studied the human pilot with narrowed eyes. You never told us why you came to the graveyard ring, she said. He leaned against the bulkhead, smirk fading to something more human, softer. You already know why. Leora tilted her head. Because you felt something. Oren nodded once. No bravado, no myth. Just quiet conviction. Kethra folded her arms. And if that feeling had led you to your death? Then I'd have died doing something that made sense to me, he said simply. Answering a call I couldn't prove. His words hung in the air like weightless iron. Kethra turned away, unsettled not by the statement itself, but by how much of it she understood now. In the stillness of the following night cycle, the ship drifted near the edge of the graveyard's reach. A star, massive and pale, loomed behind them like a watching god. It cast a cold, fragile halo through the cracked hull plates, painting everything in shades of silver and sorrow. Leora knelt once more, forehead resting lightly against clasped fingers. "Do you do this every night?" Kethra asked finally, her voice stripped of its sharp edges. Leora opened her eyes slowly. "Not every night. Just the ones where I remember what's bigger than me." Kethra stepped into the room. "What is it you think listens?" Leora's eyes drifted toward the star. "Not what, who, but I don't need to understand to trust." The Threxan tilted her head, the alien equivalent of a frown. "That is the opposite of everything I was taught." "I know," Leora whispered. "That's why it terrifies you." Kethra didn't deny it. The next morning they received a signal. It wasn't from a fleet. It wasn't a distress beacon. It was something older, a pulse, a tone, a single, clean note echoing across the void from the dead satellite that had saved them. But the satellite had no power, no transmitter, and yet the signal pulsed, rhythmic, steady, almost like a heartbeat. Kethra's mandibles clicked nervously. "It's impossible," Orin leaned forward. "Then it's perfect for us." Leora's hand trembled slightly, but not from fear. She stared at the console, whispering under her breath again, not asking for anything, just acknowledging. They decided to follow it. The signal led them through a lattice of wreckage, centuries-old vessels entangled like bones of titans. Every second felt like flying through the ribs of ancient gods. The ship creaked with the pressure of navigation. Leora felt it before she saw it, a faint shimmer in the dark. Then, like the stars had blinked, it appeared. A human ark, lost 200 years ago, thought vaporized in the Great Collapse. Its nameplate still glimmered beneath layers of cosmic frost. Eden's light. Kethra's breath caught in her throat. This was not chance. No algorithm could have mapped this route from random interference. They had been led. And deep inside, the part of her that had spent its life scoffing at belief felt itself kneel. They docked in silence. The ark's interior was eerily preserved, air stale but breathable, lights flickering with the stubbornness only human engineering possessed. Murals of earth adorned the bulkheads, oceans, mountains, children laughing. A record of a world carried into the dark. Leora moved slowly, reverently. Not as a soldier. As someone walking through the bones of a story her species refused to let die. At the center of the ship they found it, a cryo bay. Hundreds of pods, and inside heartbeat sensors still faintly blinking. Faint, but alive. Orin stepped back, whispering, 200 years. "They should be dead," Kethra muttered. Leora's hand hovered above the control panel, trembling. She whispered softly into the chamber. Someone wanted them to live too. Activating the bay was dangerous. Systems were ancient, but Orin was a scavenger, and humans had a way of resurrecting dead machines like they were waking old gods from sleep. Hours later, the ark's core pulsed to life for the first time in centuries. The hum of the reactor filled the chamber like the deep exhale of a slumbering beast, and then one pod opened. The woman inside gasped like the universe itself had pressed breath back into her lungs. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. But alive, Kethra stood frozen. The odds of this were microscopic. Beyond calculation, no numbers could explain it. The rescue became something larger. In the days that followed, the ark's pods were stabilized. Dozens of humans, a lost generation, be brought back from the edge of eternal silence. Orin rerouted his ship's systems to sustain them. Leora spent sleepless hours moving between the cryo chambers, her whispers not of prayer now, but of thanks. Kethra remained at the viewport, staring into the endless dark. She no longer asked, why? She simply listened. When the ark finally moved under its own power again, Leora stood with Kethra at the bridge. Outside, the stars looked different. They hadn't changed, but she had. You still don't believe, Leora said softly. Kethra shook her head. No, I don't understand. But I stopped pretending the void is empty. That's enough, Leora whispered. Kethra tilted her head. For what? For the universe to meet you halfway. When the Eden's light rejoined human space weeks later, its return would ignite a storm of headlines, debates, philosophies, and arguments. Some would call it a miracle. Others would call it probability. Scientists would map out trajectories. Preachers would speak of divine hands. But none of them had been there in the graveyard ring. None of them had heard the silence when it listened back. Only 3 souls had: a believer, a skeptic, and a man who followed a feeling, and that was enough. Long after, on a quiet night beneath a field of stars, Kethra knelt, awkwardly, unsure of form or tradition, and whispered into the dark for the first time in her life. She didn't know what to say. She didn't even know who she was speaking to. But as the silence stretched back at her, something inside whispered too, not words, not answers, just the echo of faith. Not luck, Leora had said in the darkness. Someone wanted us to live, Kethra finally understood. The universe had always been watching. It just waited for someone to speak first.